Change and fix the foundations. This was the promise of the new UK Prime Minister when he took office. But after 100 days in power, has Keir Starmer succeeded in balancing the political landscape? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, Keir Starmer pledged reforms across key areas, including the economy, immigration, crime and education. Yet since coming to office, he has faced relentless chaos and political challenges. Is Starmer truly capable of steering a steady ship?
We did it! You campaigned for it. You fought for it, you voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now.
This was Keir Starmer's promise after winning the UK general election in July, ending 14 years of Conservative rule. But the first 100 days of his term have been anything but smooth.
The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves.
A £22 billion black hole in public finances was found just weeks after coming to power. It came as violent riots spread across the country. They were the worst riots the country has seen in over a decade. Starmer reacted by dealing with criminals quickly and giving long sentences, adding to the UK's prison overcrowding crisis. A solemn speech in the gardens of Downing Street did nothing to lift public mood.
Frankly, things will get worse before they get better.
Compounded by proposed cuts to the winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. The decision overshadowed the Labour Party conference. Starmer lost a confidence vote brought by the leader of Unite Union.
I do not understand how our new Labour government can cut the winter fuel allowance for pensioners and leave the super-rich untouched.
Keir Starmer has also been hit by a Freebies scandal for accepting thousands of pounds worth of gifts and hospitality. They included tickets to a Taylor Swift concert and clothing for him and his wife. It cost him an MP, Rosie Devold, who stepped down over what she called his greed. Then, in a major setback for his administration, his chief of staff, Sue Gray, resigned after internal criticism regarding her management style in Downing Street. Her departure followed leaks about her salary, which was reported to be higher than the Prime Minister's. With internal divisions and public scrutiny, the questions remain: can Starmer stabilise his leadership and deliver on his promises?
Well, let's meet our guests. Here with me today in the studio is Adam Boulton, a renowned journalist and political broadcaster. Scarlett MccGwire, she's a former Labour Party advisor in the United Kingdom, and the political commentator Nigel Nelson. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Adam, I'll start with you. The slogan ahead of the election was "Time for change." Keir Starmer was change. After 100 days, we've just seen a big change. Sue Gray, Chief of Staff, gone, and Morgan McSweeney taking over from her. Give us your assessment of all this change.
Well, in a sense, we're back to normal, aren't we? In as much as we've got allegations of sleaze against the government, we've got infighting between, in this case, not so much ministers as officials. So I think the danger of what's happened over this month is that a rather disillusioned public looks at the government and just thinks more of the same. And that is a liability. I mean, if one has to say 100 days in, how far has the government got? I think they're back to square one, and maybe the budget, which they're going to announce in 3 weeks' time, will be a restart. They certainly haven't had a honeymoon. Their popularity in opinion polls has dropped. Their policy announcements, particularly one to cut winter fuel allowance, have backfired badly. And as you say, there's been this lack of coordination in Downing Street as to what they want to do and why they're there. But I would caveat all this by saying, nonetheless, Here is Keir Starmer, no significant challenge within his own party, secure majority in the House of Commons, so likely to be there for another 4 years. But has he helped himself, if we think 4 years ahead, for the chances of the Labour Party being re-elected? Not so far.
Scarlett, he will obviously want to look at 5 years in government at least, not 100 days. He won't be bothered. But I guess he will be frustrated.
Yeah, no, I think you know, looking at it from Keir's point of view, it's a game of two halves in a way, except the halves are in parallel instead of one after another. On the one hand, there has been chaos in Downing Street. We've heard about it. We've seen the PR operation has barely operated. All of that has been pretty terrible, which is why we haven't heard about anything. And on the other hand, if you look at the cabinet ministers, you know, there's Angela Rayner, who's brought out a massive thing for workers. There's Bridget Phillipson, who is overhauling the curriculum so that we actually we go back to bringing in the arts, and she's looking at education properly. And then there's Ed Miliband with his Great British Energy, which is going to be in Aberdeen. So actually, people have been getting on with the job, the elected people, and meanwhile the officials have been like rats in a sack.
Nigel, your assessment of the first 100 days?
Well, it's not great for a start. I mean, his approval rating has gone down 45 points since the election. I think that what Adam was saying was absolutely right. The worst thing that's come out of all this is that Keir Starmer might have been a bit boring, but he promised to be different. There was this feeling that he had total integrity, man of virtue, and suddenly you get all these free gifts and other freebies coming out. And what that does is make the electorate think, well, they're all the same. There's no difference between whichever party that we put in, they all do the same things. And that, I think, that the trouble about that is, I think that is long-lasting. I don't think that goes away just because you've cleared it up in the first 100 days.
Adam, talk to me about the freebies. I mean, you've been in politics a very, very long time. They obviously get invited places, football matches, pop concerts. How do you feel it looks seeing a newly installed Prime Minister partying away to Taylor Swift at Wembley?
Well, I think what we've seen is that Sir Keir Starmer, who was an eminent lawyer, Britain's chief prosecutor, has applied the rules as in if it's not illegal, it's okay. And unfortunately, that's not how it looks to the general public. So, you know, even the quantities of money, the fact that he apparently on himself spent over £20,000 on new suits and glasses, perfectly legal donation, but it looks bad, particularly at a time when you're cutting fuel payments to pensioners who may be trying to get by on about £1,000 a month. Secondly, ministers do need to go to public functions, and as Keir Starmer's pointed out, they are invited to things by many people who want to speak to them, get access, be thought well of. But again, it gets complicated because the big issue has been around invitations to Taylor Swift's concerts in London, which, first of all, they were very expensive. So the tickets were £500 plus. So if you're taking a family, you're talking about £2,000 or something else like that. Secondly, the problem comes when it merges with policy. So we now hear, probably quite reasonably, that Taylor Swift got additional and abnormal levels of security provided by the police in London. But when you've got the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary taking freebies to her concert, critics are going to say, well, this is a bit suspicious. You know, this smells a bit. And even, you know, the Prime Minister has been very insistent that he's an ordinary bloke and he wants to show that by going to Arsenal, the football club, with his son. You might think fair enough. You might even think fair enough that he has accepted an upgrade, effectively, to a director's box for security reasons. But then when the government comes forward and says, well, actually, we're going to take quite significant powers to regulate football in this country, again, you know, it looks messy.
Scarlett, just on that point, it's all about how it looks, isn't it? Because the public have had 14 years of chaotic times, really, with the Conservatives.
Oh, no,
And
absolutely. Everything is about how it looks. And of course, the joke is that up until now, government ministers have never had to declare anything publicly, right? They've taken it through their departments, but that's about it. And actually, finally, that has been changed so that we are going to know what they do. Because certainly, I mean, for decades, people have been going to concerts, whatever, whoever. I mean, and Adam's right. I mean, for instance, you know, the problem with the Taylor Swift concert is the tickets were given by the Football Association, right? Who are trying to persuade the government not to regulate them. They own Wembley. They said you can have some tickets. So I do think, and what I think is this is a real reset call. Is from now on, you know, we are going to have a hair shirt government, and it's a very good thing too.
Nigel, talk to me about winter fuel payments. So in the UK, when it gets cold, pensioners get £300 to help with the heating bills.
It depends on the age, but it's between £200 and £300, and they get that every winter tax-free.
It was. It was,
yes.
And now it's being taken away.
This winter is taken away from all but the poorest pensioners, which means that 10 million old people will lose it. That is probably the biggest misstep so far in policy terms of this government. And I think that, again, there's been a communications failure, just as there was over the freebies. But what Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, should have done was to tax it so people who don't need this payment will give a large chunk of it back. And if you really wanted to do the job properly, it's to start getting rid of the rather old-fashioned way we have of divvying out money to old people. So, for instance, people still get free prescriptions at 60. The retirement age is 66. So that should be changed. There's no reason why something that dates back to the 1960s should be happening today. And where the communications operation has gone wrong is that Rachel Reeves can't explain why she suddenly needs this £1.4 billion, which scrapping the fuel allowance will raise, why she needs it at this moment. She said she's got a huge 22 billion black hole to fill left by the last government. That's big money, but it still doesn't explain why this money is needed instantly.
But on that point, Adam...
the other problem, of course, was that the government has been very precious about saying we've got a budget in October, we're not going to announce anything. And then suddenly they announced this, more or less simultaneously with agreeing to the full awards for public sector workers, plus full awards for strikers in the health sector and in the rail sector, some of whom are earning, you know, in excess of £60,000, a lot more than the average pensioner. So it looks so terribly bad, particularly for a government that has said, you know, we're a Labour government, we're going to be on the side of fairness, we're going to be on the side of looking after everybody.
Scarlett, let's talk about the race riots in the first few weeks of the Starmer premiership. A lot of people felt that having a former chief prosecutor in Downing Street, that he actually did very well on dealing with all of that violence.
Yeah, I think he did do very well. I mean, I think it was quite scary for the first week as it kept on going on. And actually, I think there wasn't enough condemnation of the rioters from all parties, that there was, oh, well, you know, I mean, we have to think they have a real reason for being out there, instead of saying it is absolutely unacceptable to be assaulting police and frankly, you know, to be going around mosques and trying to intimidate and Muslims who felt they were going to be killed. And what Keir Starmer did, absolutely rightly, is he said, you know, we might have problems with our court systems, we might have problems with our police. Nothing matters. We're putting these people, we're arresting these people, we're jailing them, and that's happening. And suddenly, poof, it all went. And it was really, really good. And that, I mean, I think undoubtedly that he stopped it, and he stopped it well.
Nigel, he did very well, didn't he, in terms of he knew short, sharp shock and all of this goes away.
Yes, it goes back to previous riots where that has actually worked. And also the important thing there was how serious they might have been, that We've just had the Director General of the Security Service standing up and saying 25% of MI5's resources now go into right-wing extremism. These people were the foot soldiers of the people behind that. So it could have turned into something much, much nastier. And so it was really important the Prime Minister put his foot down, even though he gets accused of two-tier policing for doing it.
And Adam, just on that point, following on, so he then had to make the difficult decision that the prisons were full because he inherited a mess from the Conservatives, and he had to start letting out, what was it, 1,700 criminals in a week?
Yes, absolutely. And this point about two-tier policing, of being tough on, right-wing rioters who claimed that their complaint was about immigration and illegal migration, has been contrasted, including by the Conservative opposition, with rather more lenient treatment of the police of pro-Palestinian marchers, for example. I'm not equating them, but that equation is being made. And as you say, he was talking tough against the rioters at a time when people were having to be released from prison before their sentences were complete because prisons were overcrowded. This was something that would have happened anyway. It would have happened under any government. In fact, the previous government had drawn up plans for it to happen. But he also has, if you like, been seen to be tough on people protesting about immigration at a time when the government has still not got a handle on illegal migration. And again, this is something that his critics have seized on. We have had, I think, record numbers of people in recent days, the so-called people coming across the channel in boats. So that issue is still alive, and the accusation of two-tier or double standards is out there.
Scarlett, did he fully appreciate the scale of the challenge when he got into Downing Street? I mean, a wonderful victory. He won so many seats. What was it, 412 Labour MPs returned? Did Starmer really understand the scale of the job he would be doing?
I think he understood it as a CEO of a business. I think he certainly understood, as Adam would say, about that the prisons were overfull and things were going to have to be done. He certainly, we all understood, frankly, not just Keir Starmer, we all understood that the economy was in a complete mess and we were going to have to do things about it. Nobody was surprised when Rachel went, "Oh, it really is bad." So I think he understood that. What my worry is that he doesn't understand the politics properly. So, Adam talks about two-tier policing. I mean, actually, what they weren't saying is, look, there aren't riots on the 100,000 people who go on these Palestine marches. And a lot of people feel, that actually what the Palestine marches do is they allow a lot of pro-Palestinian people to shout, and then that's over, and they're not sitting in their rooms feeling bad. But also, Just Stop Oil, which have peaceful protests. The leaders were jailed for 5 years. That's what we have to remember, is that actually there's a lot of jailing going on at the moment.
Nigel, let's look ahead. Budget coming up, as Adam had pointed out, in a matter of weeks now. There's a risk that this could become a very unpopular government.
Well, there's a risk it'll be an unpopular budget, certainly. That's what the Chancellor has said to expect. And yes, it depends on the various things that go through there. She's having a problem at the moment whether or not the various measures she has, taxing non-DOMs living here, whether that will raise the money that it's meant to, adding extra taxes to private school fees, whether, again, that will raise the money that she intends. I think if you're looking at where his future problem is going to be and where he's likely to become the most unpopular is actually with planning, because what he's going to do is to ease the planning laws so you can build 300,000 homes a year. That would more than we've been able to do for many years now. He's going to need land for his wind farms and his solar farms and new dams for hydroelectric power for his green revolution. When people find these things on their doorstep, they're going to be very, very angry.
Adam, your reading of this budget, Rachel Reeves has a huge financial black hole to fill in. There's some speculation capital gains tax could go up to 39%.
Yeah, I mean, the two latest ones are that capital gains tax could go up quite dramatically. Of course, the argument to be made there is why should people who are living off investments pay less tax than people who are going to work and earning it? There's also a suggestion there could be quite a significant tax on employers with national insurance contributions by employers going up. So we know tax rises are going to be there, although, disappointingly, if you like, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which looks at government finances, has just said that in addition to the tax rises which we were expecting, they need to find another 16 billion a year, which is a significant amount. That said, we're also seeing the government, and one area that Scarlett talked about those ministers who've been successful. Another minister who's been quite successful is Louise Hay at Transport. I mean, she is now saying that big infrastructure projects involving rail are going to go ahead. And it appears that is because the government is going to change its own rules and say it's all right to invest for infrastructure. And they hope that off the back of that, the private sector will say, well, if the government is making the economy grow because of investment in infrastructure, then we're going to follow with specific investments. So I think there is an opportunity. I don't know whether it's going to happen, but I think a bold budget where the headlines coming out of it are as much government spending on major projects as taxes going up could be a very significant reset for this government.
Scarlett, I want to finish by talking about party discipline and governmental discipline. Morgan McSweeney is now Chief of Staff. What difference will that make inside Number 10, do you think?
Well, I think everybody knows that he's completely ruthless. And so, I mean, possibly the briefings will stop. But actually, the problem is the briefings, there's been a briefing war between him, his people, and Sue Gray's people. Obviously, he won it, Sue's out. But actually, there has been this quiet briefing about the boys' club. And I mean, the danger is about briefings is when they come out of the party. And that's when they come out of the officials. So I think that's a problem. I think mostly that the MPs will actually take the whip. I think there'll be very, very few. I mean, until we find out exactly what's in the budget. But what worries me is they cannot go on doing that. If you vote against a whipped thing, that you then are thrown out of the party. I mean, we've got to have discipline, but we cannot go back to saying you have to do everything that I say, because there are an awful lot of those MPs who know that if they don't vote with their consciences or vote with what their constituents, they are one-term MPs. That is the problem.
Nigel, did it matter that Sue Gray was earning more than the Prime Minister she was advising?
Yes, because of perception again. I mean, full marks for her. She stood her ground, and women have a pretty tough time in Whitehall. So from that point of view, I can see why she did what she did. But if you end up with somebody who, although she hated it, was in the public eye because of she was the chief investigator on Boris Johnson's lockdown party breaches, when you know that the press, if you like, is after you, to do that, it just throws red meat at them. So I think that it's the perception again. She didn't do anything wrong, but the perception was bad, and yes, it mattered.
Adam, just give me your view on the next few hundred days then. Do you think Starmer can turn it round, get a grip, and everyone can move on happily?
I think that would be a tall order. I mean, just briefly on Sue Gray, ultimately, the buck for that has to stop with the Prime Minister. Because either you accept her critics saying that she was the wrong person in the wrong job, in which case she was personally recruited to do that job by Sir Keir Starmer, so it shows bad judgment. If you believe that she was hard done by and the victim of negative briefing and all that, it was Keir Starmer who set up this structure within Downing Street of basically having two deputies, one neither in charge of the other, and that resulted in the feuding between them, which has embarrassed the government in this way. And I do think that what we're seeing with Keir Starmer is that the job of Prime Minister is bigger than almost anyone expects, and it tends to find you out. And he's ended up in the situation where he hasn't had important officials around him. You know, there's a vacancy for National Security Advisor, there is a vacancy for the Cabinet Secretary, the man effectively in charge of the government. That has left him very exposed. And I think he's got to get out of his comfort zone of the people who campaign with him and win the election, which obviously is a party political activity, and find people who actually understand how government works. And I don't think he's get that. And I just finally, we haven't talked about the international dimension. Keir Starmer has tried to present a much more positive and cooperative face towards the Europeans and to take a leadership role in Ukraine and in defence. But in neither has he taken any risks so far. I mean, with Europe, he's so far rejected their olive branches of let's have mobility for people under 30, even although the vast majority of the people who voted for him want it. And likewise, you know, on defence, there's a review. There's not necessarily any evidence that the UK is going to be in a position to back up its promises.
Adam, Scarlett and Nigel, thank you all so much for your insight on that one. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.